therapist, your life and relationship strategist. Today we are talking about the ultimate guide to burnout. And when I mean burnout, I'm talking about it could be parenting, it could be work, it could be caretaking of an elderly parent, it could be just about anything that you can conceive of. What we're going to talk about today is going to apply to you. So I'm so excited to have you all here, whether you're watching live, welcome. I really encourage your comments and questions. If you're watching the video after the fact, thank you so much for taking the time. If there's anything that I say that's helpful to you, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe so that you can get more exciting tips about when I'll be live on YouTube. So let's talk about burnout. Burnout is something that happens when our minds and our bodies, and even our spirits, if that's something that you believe in, reach a level of exhaustion that's beyond healthy functioning. So when we're pushing ourselves past the limits of what's really optimal functioning. And there are some people who can function on much less sleep and can do a lot more, and there are some of us that require more sleep. I say us because up to me, I require more sleep, and we require more rest. This also has a slight correlation related to personality style, meaning introvert or extrovert. Extroverts get kind of revived and energized from being around people and doing things, whereas introverts need more downtime and more quiet in order to recharge their batteries. So it's important to understand how you function and how you function optimally in order to understand how best to beat burnout. So there's nothing to be ashamed of if you're an introvert or you require more rest. In fact, I would celebrate those things. A lot of people struggle with feeling guilty that they're introverted or that they need more sleep, but the reality is that is who you are and that is how you are. And so if you fight that, you're just going to end up sick, whether it's body, mind, or spirit. I speak from experience. I am someone who has a chronic illness. I don't speak about it a lot publicly. I do have a YouTube video about it, but I have had to learn how to master blocking burnout. Otherwise, I crash and burn completely, and I am of no use to anyone. So that has been a process 10 years in the making, and it's actually kind of been that chronic illness that has caused me to have to face setting limits in my life and how to function optimally. So the thing that I really want to drive home today, in addition to understanding how you function best, is that when you're at a point of burnout, it probably means that you've been consistently making decisions that are draining you, and you're having a hard time saying no or setting a limit or making a change. And you may already know the reason that it's hard for you to make the change. A lot of times it's because we tell ourselves this message of I have to. And that is a repetitive message that plays in our mind, that I have to message. And the have to can be driven by the belief that I don't have enough money or there's no one else to do it. Those are two of the most common have to messages. And in today's world, those are really true statements a lot of the times. For instance, more than ever, we're two income earning households, and it requires a lot more income to sustain one household. And more than ever, we're a society where families don't live in the same places regionally. And so let's say your adult child taking care of a parent, you may be the only person in that area to help support your aging family members or that kind of thing. Or if you're a new mom, you might not have family members around you to help support you while you're adjusting to being a mom and maybe taking on the role of motherhood in addition to working. So there are some very real issues related to that message of have to, whether it's about time or money or there's no one else to do it. And so I want to help you address some of those thoughts and issues, and I'd love to take any questions or comments about those two particular topics. When it comes to making hard choices, so for instance, confronting the issue of I have to or there's no one else, I want you to consider the idea, just consider the idea that those things are not true. And I don't want to invalidate your reality, but I do want to invite you to consider that sometimes we get so bogged down in a way of thinking or a way of life that our own thinking errors, that's what we call them in therapy, our thinking errors become true to us, meaning that we're functioning in some sort of denial, or we don't have a clear picture. We feel trapped and we feel limited, and we see that there's only one solution, which is the way that we're doing it. And that really, really is a sign of burnout, and it's a sign of being bogged down by our problems. And it means our mind probably isn't functioning efficiently because it's not able to come up with creative solutions. And we probably don't have time to connect with others or to really be still and listen to the needs of our mind and body. And typically our mind and body will tell us what we need. My body tells me so loud and clear when I need to rest. And if I ignore that, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So I want you to just consider that if you believe you have to, you might be having a thinking error. If you're angry at me right now, there's probably a really good sign that I'm speaking something true. So I see a question in the chat box. Let me just check in and see what it is. What if burnout comes from your own work ethic? Someone who is a workaholic, and even when they're even tired, they don't take a break. So workaholism can come from many places. Sometimes it's because we were raised to have a work ethic where that's like a top line value system. And that's literally ingrained in our thought process, our belief system, that working and producing is the most important thing to creating success in life. So if you're a workaholic because that's a top line belief system, then you might want to take a look at if that belief system is serving you and if it's really in line with your truth versus you adopted it from someone who taught you, like a parent or a grandparent or a teacher or mentor. And take a look at, is that really your definition of success? Another thing about workaholism is if it's not just a part of your belief system, it might be escape. So some people use work to escape other issues in their lives, like maybe family conflict or depression. And that may sound silly because sometimes people who are depressed literally don't have the energy to work, but sometimes we take our emotional struggles and we funnel them into something that we're good at, or we know that we can accomplish something, and that's work. So it's really, really important to look at why are you overworking? Is it because you're escaping, or is it because it's a value system that you've adopted? Because workaholism by definition means that something is out of balance. And so if you're out of balance, meaning you're spending so much more energy on work than you are on self-care, or so much more energy on work than you are on relationships, whether it's with yourself or people that you love, you're not leaving room for fun or for love or for friendship or for other passions like creativity or things that keep you excited about life. And the more we practice something, the more we reinforce that neurological pathway. So meaning if you're a workaholic and you don't challenge that, the more that's going to become your automatic, and it's going to be harder and harder to break out of that. You'll get more distance from knowing how to have fun or remembering how to feel joy. So that's a really important concept that was just brought up, and it definitely would benefit from taking a hard look at it. I see some action in the chat box. Let me check. What if burnout is created by your own personality? You give all the time to the point your bucket is empty. What are good ways to deal with this? Great question. And the follow-up question was, can burnout have a negative impact on your work? So I want to address both along the way. So personality, I want to clarify. If your personality is one to always want to please others, there's a have to message built in there that I mentioned early on when we first went live. Is the have to that you have to be perfect or that you have to meet the demands of others? If that's the part of your personality that leaves your bucket empty and leaves you feeling burnt out, then that's the have to distortion that we would want to take a look at. Because if you're valuing other people's opinions or validation over your own body and mind's needs, then there's an imbalance there. And it can be really scary. I want to acknowledge this. It can be really scary to break away from that habit, because it becomes a habit. Not only does it start as a belief system, but it becomes a habit to prioritize other people above yourself. I'm going to get a little bit deep here. A lot of times when we're prioritizing other people over ourselves, it's actually a sneaky way of avoiding our own painful feelings. Meaning, if I say, I'm going to do this for you and I'm going to do it perfectly and I'm going to over deliver, and I end up getting burnt out and worn down in the process, I might be terrified that you're going to be disappointed in me. So instead of tolerating the disappointment, I suck up the burnout and I just push through. And I say it's better to please that person than it is for me to have to sit with and deal with feeling like I disappointed somebody, like feelings of guilt or shame or inadequacy. So when we say we're prioritizing others and we're people pleasing, we're really protecting our own feelings of inadequacy. So when you say personality, what if it's my personality to over deliver or to give until I'm empty? Be aware that that comes from an imbalance in how we deal with feelings, the painful ones especially. It's better to learn how to sit with my painful feelings and to process them and release them than it is to say, I'll just suck it up. And I know that phrase, suck it up. I learned it really, really well. When I was younger, I was always told, just kind of suck it up, put your big girl panties on and do it. There's this really popular saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I used to say that a lot in college. And the reality is that consequences catch up with us eventually. And I've mentioned this from time to time on different videos. I read this brilliant blog post on Medium last week, and I wish I could remember the author's name. But he talked about a lot of the reasons that self-help doesn't work for people is because they refuse to consider that the consequences are real. For instance, if I decided to smoke a cigarette today and I knew I was going to get lung cancer today, would I still smoke that cigarette? Probably not. If I knew that if I overworked today that I was going to end up in the hospital from fatigue or from an aneurysm, would I over deliver on this project when I was pushing past my limits? Probably not. We tell ourselves that the consequences are so far delayed that we'll deal with them later, or maybe we'll avoid them completely. But those are lies we're telling ourselves, and it's really important to fight through those and to dispel them. So the second part of the question was, can burnout have a negative impact on your work? Yes. And let's not forget, we're not just talking about work. We're also talking about parenting. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about taking care of our aging parents. So family relationships, love relationships, work, it absolutely has an effect, because I can promise you that when I am burnt out, whether it's from parenting and work and having fun, and I get sick, that has a negative impact on my work, my marriage, my sex life, my friendships, because I can't commit to the things that I want to do. So burnout in any arena has a negative effect on all of it. I'm not as creative. I got an email from my coach today, and she knows she's the best in the business. She's amazing. I couldn't function without her. I can tell you it was something about a unique URL link, and I have no idea what it meant. And that's because I'm tired. And that's real. For me, I really am tired this week. And so after this, I'm probably going to go take a nap, because I know to be at my best tonight when I go see clients and run groups, I need to rest. And if I don't do that, then I'm not going to be on my A game. So burnout absolutely has a negative effect, and it is my responsibility to recognize the consequences and to not push them off. So thank you so much for your questions. Let's see, there's some more. What's the difference between fatigue and what actually turns out as burnout? What signs do we need to worry about? That's an awesome question. because sometimes we do have to kind of carry more of a burden than we always have to. Like there might be a temporary amount of time where we are going to get fatigued, and you know, it's just part of life. So for instance, let's say if you're a marathon runner, which I am not, but if you're a marathon runner, you might get to that 25th mile and you might say like, this is impossible, I can't do it. But the reality is you only have a mile or so more to go. But when you're done, you're going to rest, you're going to hydrate, you're going to feed your body, and you're not going to run another marathon the next day. You're going to take time out and you're going to let your body heal before you take on another project like that. So whether it's a fitness type goal like that, or it's a project, or it's parenting, or it's traveling, we need to build in breaks for ourselves. And we may know that there's going to be a period of exhaustion before we get that break, but we need to make sure that the break is sufficient enough to heal our body. And that it depends on the situation. If you suffer from an injury, let's say you get injured or an illness, a lot of times we try to rush back and then we end up doing more damage in the long run. So the things, in answer to your question, the things that I would look out for, the difference between just fatigue and burnout, are a chronic tendency to have racing thoughts, to not be able to relax at night, to have a difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Now, this isn't across the board because some people have other issues related to insomnia, but these are signs and symptoms of burnout versus just fatigue. Physical symptoms in your body. So believe it or not, a lot of times when people have heartburn or indigestion on a chronic basis, that's a sign of burnout. Or GI symptoms in general, because it probably means there's imbalance in our diet. We're not moving enough. The levels of stress are creating increased levels of acid. Headaches are a really good sign of burnout. So you want to pay attention to physical symptoms in your body. Weight gain or weight loss, both are really good signs of burnout, because for some people who overwork, they forget to eat. Some people overeat, or they don't eat healthy and they just eat on the run. And so these are kind of a really good just signs and symptoms. It also might be reduced sex drive, increased agitation, difficulty getting along with the people in your life for, like, again, chronically for extended periods of time. Those are things that would be signs of burnout. I hope I answered your question. Let's see, I think suck it up is a German thing. It's entirely possible because I have a German background. Let's see, life is suffering you, get better, get used to it. Now looking back, you can see your old beliefs. Absolutely. And you know what's interesting, to the person who made that comment, thank you so much, that sometimes when you get used to comparing yourself to others and seeing other people suck it up, and this is so common in the corporate world, it's common among moms who look at other moms and say, oh, look at her, she's involved in the PTA, she works out, she, does play dates, she keeps the house clean. When we're comparing ourselves, whatever our job arena is, and we're looking at other people and we're seeing, oh, they're doing it better, I need to work harder. I had somebody give me this example when I did a public speaking engagement a couple weeks ago, and she said she really got caught up in that distortion for a period of time. She saw everybody in her job setting working harder to the point of burnout. She said to herself, oh my goodness, I'm not doing a good enough job. I need to work harder. I need to work more, until she learned enough to learn about self-care and that they were actually doing it backwards, and she was learning to embrace a new way of life. And so I so appreciate that, to the person who made that comment, that you can reflect back and see how that was a distorted belief. And that's what I was kind of asking you guys to take a look at earlier on in the talk. Can you just consider that the message in your mind that you have to is a distortion? So I see one more question in the chat box, and then we're going to get ready to wrap up. Is there such a thing as social burnout or familial burnout? Yes. So familial burnout I hear a lot of people express that more often than not when their life is out of balance in general, because believe it or not, social connections and relationships and family relationships can be very good for our mental health. So a lot of times, if you're noticing that you have social or familial burnout, it's probably because you're burnt out in some other arena of life, that there's overall imbalance. Because a lot of times, and it also depends on the nature of the relationships, are your friendships give and take? Is your family relationship supportive, or is it conflicted? So it depends. You have to kind of take a look at the circumstances. But there's a lot of studies that in places where there is, like in Denmark, where people live in compounds or there's cohabitation, that mental health is actually improved in those areas because there's more support. So if you have a lot of friends where you're giving a lot but you don't ask for help, or you have family relationships where there's high conflict, or again, you're giving but you're not asking for help, you're more likely to get burnt out. Or those things are more likely to feel overwhelming if you're burnt out in other areas of life like work. So I hope that answered that question. I'm so grateful for the questions today and the comments. I hope that I was helpful for you in terms of taking a look at what is your nature. Are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Do you have belief systems that contribute to burnout? As in the belief that I have to give more, I cannot disappoint, I have to earn more, I have to do more, I have to be more. Are there that message of I have to, is that getting in your way? And what are some of the things that you can do to notice burnout? Like some of the chronic symptoms that might show up in your body, in your mind, in your sleep, in your attitudes towards life. And then definitely ask for help in learning how to make a plan to get yourself out of this. And it's going to take little steps at a time. You know, you're just going to say, okay, for the next hour, what's feasible to get done and what can wait? And a lot of times learning what can wait versus what really needs to be done now is important. And sometimes we can check with people and say, hey, I know I need to get this to you. Would it be okay if we extended that deadline? And that can be, a lot of times people are willing to say, hey, no problem. You may get some hard no's, but you know, at least you can get an idea of where you stand instead of just assuming that it all has to get done right away. So thank you so much for all of the interaction. Like I said earlier, if this video has been helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe so that you can get notifications for when we're live on YouTube and when new topics hit the channel. I'd also love it if you're interested in exploring therapy or coaching. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can check out my website, dawnwigginstherapy.com. You don't have to live where I live. I can come to you. I have a HIPAA compliant software that I use to provide distance-based therapy, and that is the way of the world. So don't worry if we're not nearby. I would love to get to know you and see if we're a good fit. So I look forward to seeing you next week, where we are going to talk about the holidays. It is the week of Thanksgiving here in the U.S. next week, and we're going to be kind of launching into the holiday season. I might be a week off in my head, but and I really look forward to that topic. So welcome back next week. I hope you join us, and have a great day.